Hey, what's going on, guys? Been telling a few stories lately in my videos, and there's some other information I wanted to share with everybody. Um, and it just kind of reminded me now that I remember watching a YouTube video from the Reverend Jeff Kelly, and I kind of poo-pooed it. This was years and years ago, but it was entitled Sasquatch in Africa or something like that. And I was thinking, Bigfoot in Africa? Yeah, right, we would have heard about this already. Why aren't we hearing about stories from Africa if they're over there? And I was thinking, I just didn't think that they were there in the southern hemisphere or by the equator. I don't know, I could understand North America, but it's like you don't hear a lot of Central America stories about the wild man. So I'm thinking maybe they're up in the more northern latitudes. I don't know. But having married my wife, her mother has shared a lot of information about these creatures, and also she's kind of told some stories that I found interesting. One in particular, but she had mentioned to my wife something the other day that you may not have ever considered, and it's something that I have never heard before, and I just wanted to kind of share it concerning missing people and cannibalism and the tendencies of some of these creatures potentially. And she said, I know your husband has a connection with these things and he likes to go out there and look for them. She says, but you need to take something into consideration. She says there's different kinds, and if you see the kind, and this is, realize this is third hand, my wife's telling me this story in broken English, trying to convey this to me clearly, and I'm asking a lot of questions, but she's saying if you see ones with the ears that are like back and closer to their neck, she said those ones eat people. And I thought, wow, I've never heard this before, ever. You hear people ask, what did it look like? Can you describe the face, the neck? Did it have ears, etc.? But I've never heard anybody distinguish between the location of the creature's ears. And she's kind of telling me, yeah, the ones, they'll have ears that are back more, closer to like where their neck comes up and it attaches to their head. She said some will have like higher ear, and she said careful of the ones with the different ears. So I'm just kind of taking that into consideration and sharing with everybody just in case they have an encounter or they've seen these creatures or they even have the chance to ask somebody about the ears. It might not be apparent right away to even consider that as a determining factor in the nature of the experience at all, but it's just another thing to take into consideration. Now, the story I wanted to tell was a really interesting story about a old woman in this village in Somalia who was getting very fearful of having to walk down to this watering hole and get water. And so she's, there's elephants, there's lions and tigers and stuff. I mean, there's hyenas, there's wild animals, and she had lost children to the animals walking out at night to the watering hole. And it was a very dangerous time. This was in the late 1970s. And so she was, this woman found herself to be distraught and was crying, and was down at the watering hole and just lamenting about her situation and everything, and having lost her children. And as I understand it, she was approached by the Sasquatch people, and they appeared to her, and she saw like 2 or 3 of them, and she's scared, and they're coming closer to her, and she's going, oh no, this is it. And somehow they communicated with her, I think in her mind, and they told her, "Don't be afraid, and we hear you, and we know you've lost your children, and we know that you need help." And they gave her this stone. They presented this rock to her, and they told her, "Think of us, and we will be here to help you." And so, she says, "Okay," and presumably she gets what she needs, or she gathers her things and leaves and goes home. Now, this rock that is just described as like green and gray, it would change color. Like, I'm kind of confused as to how it would change color, whether it was in the sun or if it would change color internally, because my wife explains that this rock would glow at night. And I said, how bright is this thing glowing? And she said, like bright enough that you can see, like you could go to the bathroom by the light of it, but not so bright that it's going to light up the whole house. I said, like a night light, for a child who's scared of the dark? And she said, yeah, like a night light. So I'm not sure if it was changing from green to gray light, or if the color in the sun had a kind of an iridescence to it. I'm not exactly sure how this happened, but this woman would look at the rock and think of them, and they would instantly be outside of her domicile. It was like a earth house, made of mud and different things. We watched a video of these people making this stone house out of these earth bags, and she described to me that that's a technique that they use in Africa to make houses out of mud and bags of dirt and stuff. So, sandbags, and then cover it with mud and insulate it, adobe style or whatever. But these Sasquatch would be outside of the home, like instantly. They would bring her water, and they would bring her food. And it got to the point where people were kind of thinking she's crazy, because they'd say, "Oh, you need to take care of yourself. You need to make sure you have water." And she would say, "Well, my children are going to bring me water." And people would say, "Your children are dead." And she would say, "No, my children, they take care of me." She like attributed these things like to her children, as her children or something. So, but what happened with this story is that somebody heard about this, these Australians, and they showed up one day. And my wife says, there's no mistaking when the white people come. Everybody in the village knows about it because they're so different. And when the white people in Africa show up, it becomes a big deal, and they want to know what's going on. So anyway, they tell this woman, "We know about this stone, and we want to test it and everything." And she says, "Well, I don't want you taking it. You can't have it." And they said, "Oh, well, we're just going to take pictures of it then." Okay, well, she said, "Okay, fine, go ahead, take some pictures of it." But when they went to photograph it, apparently they had chipped off a piece of the stone, a piece of this rock, to do testing on it against her wishes. And she wasn't happy about that, but the rock still worked. And they came back and they said, "We want to buy this rock off of you. We'll pay for it. We'll give you whatever you want for it." And she said, "No, this is my livelihood. This is my rock." And they said, "We'll trade you. We'll give you food, whatever you need. We'll buy you all this food." And she says, "No, this rock brings me food. This rock brings me the water. I cannot live without this rock. This rock is what's keeping me alive." And so she refuses again to sell the stone. Well, they come back again, and they're trying to make an offer to this woman, and she says no. She says, I'm not in a safe place in this country. If I don't have this, I won't live." And my wife said, well, eventually that woman left with these guys, and she never came back. And the consensus was that they actually took her, in exchange for this rock, they took her to Australia and helped her live there, and helped her get a life in Australia. Now, none of this can be confirmed, but this woman was never seen again. And the people, they didn't feel like they had bad intentions or they were like killers or anything. They seemed like decent enough people, but they were so interested in this rock that that was the only way that this woman would get rid of it, is that if her life would be guaranteed, that she could be in a city and have running water and have the things that she needed, because she couldn't survive without their help. I just found that to be an amazing story, and we talked about it last night for a while on the phone, and I asked her, can I tell this story to my YouTube viewers? And she said, oh yeah, go ahead. So I just wanted to share that story with you. I thought it was really, really interesting, and you know, the stories from Africa are something we don't get to hear a lot, so I'm lucky that I get to hear these things and consider these things and put it all into the puzzle and see where it all fits. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoy that story, and let me know what you think. Talk to you later. Bye.